August 17th, and it is 5:33. So Stephanie, could you do the roll call?
Certainly. Commissioner Wolf,
Here.
Commissioner Bogue,
Here.
Commissioner Young.
Here.
All right. Nemeth isn't with us yet.
All right. So the next thing on our agenda is the agenda is the approval of the agenda. So can I get Jeb, we have to do these Robert's rules things. So I'll ask for a motion for approval, and then there'll be a second, and then we'll move along. So first of all, are there any questions, comments, or anything like that on the agenda? Okay, I'm seeing Peter shaking his head. So could I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. All right, so the agenda is approved. So the next item is our first public commentary. Stephanie, do you see anybody?
As of right now, I'm not seeing anyone, but I will put a call out if any member of the public would like to give a comment. Now is the time to do so. There's also another opportunity towards the end of the meeting as well. I am not seeing anyone.
Okay, great. So item E is the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. Does anybody have any changes or questions or comments on the minutes from the July meeting?
They look good to me.
Okay. And since Jeb was not here, I'm not going to make him second. So I guess procedure is, Peter, if you and I are okay with them, then it's probably okay. So
Okay, no, that seems good.
I'm going to say
moved and voted.
Good. Okay. All right. So the regular business agenda items.
All right. So I just have a few things. So Jeb, this is usually my time where I just give sort of general updates about things that have been happening recently at market. And then, if there's any questions or comments, we can have that at the end. So we are still having our parade of new vendors joining. We have a brand new vendor that joined us yesterday that specializes in honey and maple syrup and maple products. So I'm excited because now we actually have someone who sells maple sugar as well as maple syrup and honey. They will be a Wednesday market vendor for the foreseeable future. They might transition to Saturday later, but they're going to see. I think they do have other markets that they do on Saturday as of right now. That is a new person that just joined. Another exciting news, Valentine Gardens, Tom Rumpel is back. He took a pandemic hiatus, but last week he started coming back with his dahlias. So we are very, very excited to have him back. For those of you that don't know, is a very veteran vendor, much loved by customers and vendors alike. So we're excited to have Tom back. And then lastly, we have a new vendor coming on. They haven't started yet. They produced their product in the Growing Hope Incubator Kitchen in Ypsilanti. It is actually a peanut butter product with a social mission. They actually raise money to, I don't want to butcher, I don't want to not explain it properly, but they raise money to send like enriched peanut butter products to needing children all around the world. So it's a partly they'll be selling their product, but then also the social mission of trying to get healthy foods to people all over the place. And they hopefully will be starting Saturday, if not next week. So those are the three newest vendors. We are also assessing. There's a new flower farm that did apply. We're deciding, do we need a 13th flower farm? Maybe their stuff sounds different. So that is another new vendor that may be coming soon, but stay tuned.
Great.
And looks like Jeff is here. Hello, Jeff. Welcome. Just
Hello.
giving some updates of what's been going on recently. All right, so move up scheduling. I've had a lot of questions from vendors wanting to know when it's going to be, when annuals are going to get an opportunity to change stalls, when daily vendors will be obtaining their seniority status. And based on what we're looking at in terms of the Michigan football schedule, which unfortunately will soon be impacting Saturday markets, it's looking like September 30th will probably be the best bet for that, because it is the first game that is not in Ann Arbor on a Saturday. And the other ones we could risk trying to do it with a later day game, but I didn't necessarily want to subject people to that. So I thought September 30th would be sort of the best choice for that. So that's what I was thinking. If anyone has any input.
Just a quick question that I'm assuming that you want to do it on a non-home game Saturday to maximize the number of people the number of vendors that are at the market.
Partly that, but it's mostly I don't want people to get completely stuck in gridlock, having to stay later.
Okay.
Also.
Got it.
And I'm just
because the other times, for example, the 9th is a 3:30 p.m. game, which would mean, if they stayed later, it would be right in the thick of it. The one after that is a 7:30 p.m. game. And the other two are noon games, which everyone knows the impacts that has on market. So that's why I was thinking September 30th would be our best bet, free and clear, easier for people to both be there and move around the city as well.
great, thanks.
Yep.
And the next thing is events.
Yes. All right. So we had our August food truck rally last night. So that was good. Not quite the same turnout as July, but I think July was like very, very large. Last night was still very good. We had 23 trucks and carts there. Similar mix to the last event. We had a few that worked there, and then some new people joined. So that was great. We had 2 different bands playing. We had Blue Sky Jazz, which is made up of U of M jazz studies students. And then we had Sam Olive, who is a solo singer, played piano, happening. So that was exciting. And I don't know, we hope to have the other U of M jazz studies students band, Blue Chops Jazz, play at the next rally, but we are in the process of solidifying that. We thought maybe it could even be a battle of the jazz students because they all know each other. So we were thinking maybe we could even do a back-to-back set in honor of back to school, which on our September 20th thing. In terms of other events, we had a great cooking demo for August with Chef Ji-Hae Kim of Miss Kim Restaurant. She made an incredibly delicious rice cake dish that was really, really good. So many people wanted samples. She actually had to make it again to feed everybody, which she did. It was great. We were very excited to have her. It was wonderful. She used a bunch of produce from Tantre Farm to make that. So that was a very successful cooking demo. We have one more left in September 13th. That is the date on that. And that will be the end of our series for the year for that. And we're already thinking about, what we can do for next year. What are things that we can tweak? What are some people that we can, add or ask back for that series for next year? Other events, we have our last story time for kids of the year coming out at the end of August. It's going to be the final Wednesday of Wednesday markets for August. And then other than that, I don't think we have any other special standalone events, but we will, of course, continually have live music and food trucks, food carts, and community groups at both Wednesday market and Saturday market. We've been figuring out a way actually to have food trucks almost every Saturday market, whereas in the past that had been really hard because things had been very full. But based on just differences with where people are placed and stall needs and when people have been at market, we really only had to turn away a food truck last Saturday because we didn't have a space for a second food truck. So we already had one there. So that's been pretty remarkable because I don't think, we had tried to do that in the past on Saturday markets, but it's been very popular and well received. to have the taco truck with us consistently, as well as Pilar's tamales. And I believe that's all I have, unless people have questions about events or comments.
It looked like the food truck rally was really successful. There were a lot of this last one I got the chance to see it, and it's quite the event. It's really fun.
Definitely puts we put a lot of effort and energy into having it and cleaning up for it and stuff. So it's a lot. But thanks. Any other comments or questions about events? All right. So an event that's not actually ours, but we are in partnership with OSI. There will be the second annual local food festival coming up on September 14th. I believe Jeb will be in attendance with his candles. And I know that they're still trying to iron out all the final details in terms of who will be participating, but I can tell you the band that we had at our first food truck rally in July, Ain't Dead Yet, will be participating. And then they plan on having similar, activities to last time, but then also hopefully more, farms. I know we have a few of our farms already signed up, and they're still recruiting more people, but that will be coming up on Thursday, September 14th, and that will be at the market on, I believe it's 5 to 8 is the window with that. So if folks are interested, feel free to come by, or if people know anyone that wants to participate, send them my way and I will connect them with OSI.
Great. That sounds like a great partnership.
Yes, and Argus is also the other partner in that event.
All right, next thing is facilities and repairs.
Great. So if you recall from last meeting, park planner, landscape architect Adam Furcho came and gave a presentation about the washout that's been going on under the market office building. We still don't really have any more information yet, as other than, it's probably going to start whatever the construction looks like next spring at the very earliest. And they have backfilled the hole with some gravel, which will just be there until that time. Our main challenge now will be having to keep salt in the winter out of that area or away from that area, which, is going to be quite the challenge. So more info coming about how that would work. We will probably have to put up a tarp and structure to keep the salt, because, once they salt the parking lot, it just gets thrown everywhere and it's really hard to contain. So that will be the most immediate task to try and safeguard that area. But we're looking at a, probably early spring start on that next year. But again, we're still waiting to hear back from the from the contractors in terms of, what are the best ways forward? What is it going to cost? All of those questions. And in terms, go ahead.
Sorry, but has anybody figured out why there was the erosion?
Nope. There's probably a lot of different factors. I think, partly the salt was one of them, the slope of the building and how, the water, I don't know if you've ever noticed on a wet day where water actually goes straight through the market office building, right? Partly it's on that slant, and then where the area of washout is the lowest point, both of that area of the actual market itself, but also the driveway. So it could be that. It could also be an issue with the roof right there, having a drip just pooling. I mean, there's a lot of different factors. We're not quite sure yet.
Right.
But that is what they had told me.
Thanks.
There's other small fixes. We've had a lot of water pipes coming down recently. Specifically in 3 locations. Well, actually 2 is water pipes down. 1 is a damaged gutter, and we are waiting for park ops to fix those. There has been a ticket put in maybe a week or 2 ago. So we are still waiting. And same thing, there's areas of crumbling concrete that we are waiting for them to fix. The most difficult area probably is over by the Shetler family's stall. It's crumbling. It's in an area that has already been fixed prior as well, but it's in that same wash zone that goes straight to the washout under the building. So there's a high volume of water that comes through there. So hopefully those things will be fixed soon. And I think that's all I had for like the physical structure. I did want to update folks that we did get a new janitorial contract for all of parks, which impacts us. So we've got a new janitorial team that has been coming to the market for a couple weeks now, maybe a month. So we're very happy with them so far. There was a few hiccups in the beginning in terms of, them understanding that it's not just our market, it's also the artisan market and other special events. So we seem to have streamlined those few hiccups, and we are very happy with them because we weren't, that enthusiastic about the prior folks for different reasons, but we were, happy to work with this new group, at least as of right now. But so that is what has been going on just in sort of the broader parks contractual world of the cleaning services. I don't know if anyone has
one.
Yeah, go ahead.
One comment coming back to the washout too, that an opportunity is that it might be an opportunity to figure out essentially a rain garden system, because it does seem like that that would be fit with the mission of the farmers market too, and connecting that to a lot of other goals with that and encouraging that. There's the hardscape, just drain everything away and get it more hardscape to harden further, or there's to soften it, and that it might be worth advocating for something more like that, because at least that would fit more with the kind of the mission and aesthetic of the market. It's not just the market, but that would be helpful. So that I suspect that's on their radar, but if not, that might be worth kind of poking them and getting it a little higher.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then in terms too, we're hoping this will also go in line with going curbless. I know I mentioned this, and I think Adam mentioned this before, but that's going to be something that we're excited about, and was already something that we had been talking about because of the ADA assessment that was done last year. But I think that could help. This other issue too is that, in terms of where our shed is that really the best use of space? Could it be expanded? I mean, that whole area needs a lot of help because I feel like it sort of just gets storage stuff sort of thrown over there, and there's nowhere else for it to go. But we could have a much better use of space also in that whole back zone. And that's the upside of all this. It opens the door for these more conversations about, let's not just fix it, but is there improvements that we could do as part of it?
Yep, exactly.
Great point. All right, and that's all I have for that item. Okay.
Oh my God. PMAC, Carytown vacancy.
So we filled one seat, so great. Thanks, Jeb. But we are still down a PMAC rep person. Then also, once we adopt the new bylaws, we're also going to need to recruit some more folks. So I did meet the brand new person that's going to have the pizza place coming into the Carytown shops just yesterday. So who knows? There might be other people coming in. They may have interest. But that was another thing I thought about when I was reading over the bylaws. It says sort of, we're back to that vagueness of it says like a representative. So I don't know what that means, or I don't know if people read that and think like, oh, I'm just a resident, or, oh, I'm not a representative of anyone. I just happen to have a business here or live here. So that might be something else we may want to tweak with our updates. Maybe that would help to recruit. But I don't know, Jeb, if you have any connections with Carytown businesses or residents. We've been sort of reaching out to whoever we can, but just hasn't had anyone biting as of yet.
I can poke around.
Okay. Super.
I emailed Lisa at the tea house too, but just emailed her and didn't hear back from her. So I'm going to try to stop by and say in person. And I specifically said to her, it's not only you, because I know you're busy, or any of your employees that would be interested.
Right.
I think that's just fine as well.
Great. Yeah, so obviously anyone that has a stake at all in the area.
And I think that was the intention with the, it's where I went through some noodling and exploring too with expanding that definition or clarifying it. And in some ways it's want to make sure we don't tie our hands more because it's always a matter of like, it's been interpreted as like someone who lives here, someone who works here, someone who owns it could be pretty vague, which I think is probably to our advantage, just so that we can have a pretty big pool and it's not overly restrictive. But it might be, so it's this balance. Yeah.
Right. And who knows? I mean, it could even be like a teacher or administrator or even a student at community. You know what I mean? Like it could be something even like that we haven't really thought about before.
Absolutely. I think that would be useful too. Just getting more diverse voices and younger voices too would be really good. That would be
totally.
I actually know that the head at community, so I will email her.
Okay, fantastic. Great. And then the last thing that I had is, unfortunately, Alex's 2 months off is coming up very rapidly. So his last day will be September 4th. So very, very quickly it's upon us. He's got basically 2 Saturdays left before that. So we're sad that his 2 months off is here. But the upside, he is also going back to grad school. So we're very happy for him. He's in the C's program now. He will be studying food justice. So we're very, very excited for him. So, you know, in his eyes, it's probably like a good thing that this is the 2 months off coinciding with him easing into school. But you know, it does mean we have come to the point where we will be short-staffed again when it is still our high season. And I have reached out to Brittany from the Senior Center asking her if any of her staff may need extra hours. Luckily, she has had a person tabling at Wednesday Market for them who is interested. So hopefully we'll have, you know, at least somebody coming in to cover part of the time. I've also reached out to get help for the food truck rallies because, you know, doing that with just 2 people can be done, but it means, you know, we're at the market till like 10 p.m. on a market day when we'd rather sort of not have it take so long to clean up. So that's where we're at with our staffing as of right now.
So the people that you've reached out to, has that been city parks?
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Great.
So how it works is that there's always sort of other parks facilities that have staff that maybe aren't maxing out their hours or could take on additional stuff. And that's how we bridged that gap last year. And we're doing it again as well this year.
Stephanie.
Yes.
Is that this sounds like a part-time position, right?
So the way the city has it is they have what they call like full-time and part-time, but then also temporary and regular. So to make it very confusing, Alex is actually full-time, but he's considered a temporary full-time. So meaning that he does work 40 hours a week, but he's mandated to go on a 10-month on, 2-month off thing, which also can be for people that are considered what we would call temporary part-time. But the temporary part-time folks, they can all, I know, it's a lot of,
Don't worry.
it's a lot of parks jargon. Yes. So Hannah at the current moment is a temporary part-time person, meaning that she works no more than 29 hours per week. And then she will also have to go on her 2 months off, but that's not going to be until the end of January for her. Yeah. We just got sort of unlucky at the timing that Becky left. We tried to wait it out as long as we could to hire Alex, but it sort of was a situation where it was like, well, we could either lose a person in July and August or September and October. And here we are, because that's the thing. It's based on date of hire. We can't choose when it starts, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But, you know, it's something I know the city is also working with. And the reason why Parks does this is, of course, because of the liveries and other, you know, way more temporary facilities that aren't open year round like us. It makes a lot more sense to have that really, really short burst of a person that's not needed all year. And unfortunately, you know, it doesn't really make sense for us, but that's the paradigm we're operating in. And I know that Parks has been exploring sort of trying to expand more of the regular full-time positions and they're going sort of based on like highest need in terms of the facilities. And I know like we've asked for the last couple of years at least to get a second person that is a regular full-time, because again, the market could run the best, in my opinion, if we had 2 regular full-time persons and then a part-time person, if that makes sense.
As always, let us know if we can be advocates for this.
Right. And obviously I don't think it's an issue of will. I think it's more of an issue of budget and having so many parks and so many facilities and so much need, because the staffing levels are so much lower than they were even say like 20 years ago with the parks, and we've added parks and expanded facilities since then. So I think it's more of just that is the situation, and we are just one small microcosm within that.
Do you know how they set those priorities?
I do not, but I think it might have to do with sort of, hours of being open and what types of programming are being run. Obviously, like Gallup has way more staff than us because they run all the different camps and they have all the different rentals and a lot of things that need people and concession, things that need a lot of people to run them. Whereas ours, to have the market be the best, it would be great to have just like one more full-time person. And for Alex, we were able to increase him from being a temporary part-time to temporary full-time by giving him some of the inspection responsibilities. So backstory for folks.
Yeah, I'm just still thinking about the pros plan and how the farmers market was right up there with one of the most visited parks in the city.
Right. Well, it is. And we are also like the second most visited website of all of the parks websites as well. So it's just sort of, but again, we don't have the staffing needs as the much bigger facilities, right, that are running. And that's just the reality of it. So I understand, and of course, we wish it was different, but they are working on it. And maybe in the future that will change.
I'm curious, does parks have anything like an endowment in terms of it's like, I know that I think of again university models are what I'm familiar with in terms of different various schools or sub things will sometimes have their own separate sub allocations, and we before we joined parks had something like that. But it does seem like that would be a natural thing for not just the farmers market, for anything. If someone feels strongly connected to something, to be able to give resources to that thing, which could cover something like a full-time employee, it could cover infrastructure, it could cover a lot of things. But it seems like that would be either a mechanism that I don't know that they have one, so a mechanism like that, but that would be a very useful mechanism for parks to have, and in particular it'd be useful for the market, but I think it'd be useful for all of parks.
Well, I think it gets really complex being a tax-free governmental entity, whereas like there's certain things that they can't take, like the university could. So I think like that's maybe one of the issues. And also in terms of sponsorships, I think there's restrictions there. So I'm not sure, but I know like, for example, like it could maybe be a millage. For example, like OSI, their entire staff is funded by the 820 millage. All of the work they do comes from that pot. So I'm not sure. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, we actually already have a tax line for Parks and Rec on our
Right.
property taxes too.
Correct.
So there is a fair amount of money going into Parks and Rec.
But there is over 160 parks and a ton of staff. So, like it's also that side of it. It would be really nice if some of that millage for climate went to parks. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day. But I think that is all that I had about the staffing updates.
Okie doke. So the next item on our regular business is continuing conversations.
All right. So the bylaws are number 1 on this list.
So Peter, do you want to do a general summary of the changes, and then we'll open it up for any comments or questions, and then I'm thinking we're ready for a vote.
I think so. So Stephanie, can you pop it up on the screen again?
Certainly. Just give me one moment. want to get the right document.
So Jeb, just to give you an update, the rundown for this, that there are bylaws associated with this organization, just like every other committee or group on the city or any civic organization like that. And periodically, they're good to review, make sure they're up to date and reflect what we actually are doing and what we want to do. And they kind of work for the template little. It's a mini constitution, and ours hasn't been updated for over 10 years. So we figured it's about time to actually go through and do it. And in some ways, partially to synchronize it with parks, because before it was written, we weren't necessarily even part of parks. And also to address some other issues that might extend things further. So within this is the updated version, which everyone should have received, and hopefully had a chance to look through. The idea with this is that going through this, trying to figure out what needs to change and what things are okay as they are. And so we went through and identified a number of, I think, 4 areas where we could actually do a change. There are some just small wording things in terms of clarifying our mission in this case as to what we did, pulling some of this text out of other documents that we had that specified a little bit for cultivating relationships among vendors, the public, local and national government agencies, and territorial area businesses, residential neighborhoods. With this being kind of, again, this representation that we provide as our kind of core function. Scroll down. Stephanie.
Yep.
This is going to be like slide.
Right, there you go.
And the adding this additional point F and J's in strategic planning for the market. So those are 2 additional things there. It's not a wild change from where we were before, but it just helps to clarify what our role is here. So then going on to Article 4, the biggest change is that we're talking about expanding our membership. So thus far, right now, we're 5 members is what our list is, and we're proposing to go to 7. And with this, adding 2 new members, one who's another vendor who's either an annual or a daily vendor, and one additionally member who's from one of the above sets. The idea being that getting more brains on this community is helpful, and it also helps us to be more of an advocacy body, kind of keeps the institutional memory a little bit more robust, and also prevents us, if people are missing, that we actually can get a quorum. So to make sure that we're a more effective community. We're one of the smallest ones right now, and so this would put us more in line with most other boards, and that seems to be a kind of a functional number. So that's the intention behind that. The other thing too, it does correct is that thus far, as it's written right now, that there are only 2 members who are from the market and everyone else is from other places. So that it does help to balance things out a little bit, to make it so that the folks at the market actually do get a little bit more of a voice, with flexibility for how that gets allocated in the future with the 1 member at large. If you go down a little bit more, Stephanie.
Yeah.
So the section 10 is something we've added, which essentially is a term limit clause. And so this is essentially just in terms of there's the tendency or possibility of a member serving a very long time, which is good and bad. It seems like it's good to have turnover, and it's good to have new ideas. We've not had any problems with it thus far, but it seems like a good thing to include to make sure that we kind of keep it fresh and we don't get folks who are stuck in here too long, and make that going on. So that seems like a useful part. It also reflects what Parks also does too. So then continuing on. For the conflict of interest, that there were a few sections in here that we've modified. So section 7 here was essentially just saying that if you have a conflict of interest, because of the structure of this body of this community, that we have members who are vendors. And so vendors, in some ways, we're discussing issues, policies that relate to vendors. So intrinsically, there are conflicts of interest, and that's fine. The case is that you have to declare them, and that we've just, in section 7, we clarified how that conflict of interest is shared and making it annually in writing, just to make sure that's managed by the market manager, so making that clearer. Also, striking out section 9, which is that a member cannot be heard as a petitioner, because that they would be a conflict of interest. And that seems a problem in terms of if you are a vendor and you're part of this body and you have a problem, then you should be able to petition. The key is that other clauses cover that you would be recused from voting, but you can still have issues or still bring issues to the fore. So it seems like it's already dealt with in other sections how that conflict of interest is dealt, and that seems like this section 9 seemed more relevant to other bodies. If you go down further, I don't think there's anything else in there. Nope.
I'm not
Okay.
seeing anything else.
So those are the kind of the highlights of the changes, and it's just good to revisit, and it's good to have this on our mind, both in terms of what our mission is and how we operate. And good to touch it periodically to make sure that we're actually dealing with it and structured how we want to. So I would like to open the table to discussion.
Deb, I don't know if you have any questions since you haven't been here for part of our conversations leading up to this point.
I think it's a fair question. I had a chance to review it previously and with these changes and with my new status to this board, as well as not being a long-term vendor, I'm confident in your choices here.
Thank you.
I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
What does strategic planning mean in the context it's being used here?
Yeah, that's a good question. We took that straight out of the pros plan. So I figured if Parks had put it in there, we could stick it in there. So
what do you mean?
Parks in the pros plan said that here's the mission of the farmers market. Here's what they do, and that included strategic planning for the market. Peter, if I remember right, we just lifted the language right out of the pros plan. So, strategic planning can include a lot of different things. And so I think that would be something to have a conversation amongst us, and then with state park or city parks on how we can also think about coordinating with their planning.
For me too.
Okay, go ahead.
For me too, it kind of reflects what we are doing already in terms of some of the stuff of when we're discussing things like how much of the market is artisans versus food producers in this way. And that was a long discussion about exactly how that works. From my view, that's largely strategic in terms of what's the long-term consequence of this, and where do we want to position ourselves long-term, position the market or advise the market to be positioned. Those are kind of strategic decisions that are made in that way. And so that to me is an example of something that would embody such a thing. Same thing too with even like winterization project in terms of that's a long-term kind of strategy for how that could work. But how do we facilitate or help to participate in that, and so we're engaged in that strategic planning, or even like the other stuff with the other work in progress in terms of with the vendor interactions too, in terms of how to producer only. What is producer only? That's a strategic question. So that those are strategic planning discussions that go on, and this body plays a role in advising that.
Because when I think about strategic planning, I think a lot about sort of like budget-based stuff too. And I'm just not sure if that's what like the pros plan meant. Maybe it did. I don't know. But I just feel like that's stuff that like my staff doesn't even necessarily participate in. So I'm not sure like it being the advisory role, like if those things go together, but that could be that way. And I think also just like engages in strategic planning, I feel like is sort of vague. Like, what does engaging in it mean? Maybe we could change it saying like, it shall advise the market manager on the strategic plan. You know what I mean? Maybe like follow the language that we had in C, D, and E, to at least keep it consistent. Because that one is the one that seems like it's not in line with the way the others are written also, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I could see it going either way. I hear what Lisa's saying in terms of just lifting it out of the other document seems fine. And I hear what you're saying too, in terms of just getting a parallel structure with it being how active is the role? Is it of advising or is it actually engaging in it? And that there is a little bit more active feel for engagement versus advising. Advising feels a little more passive in that way. And that I think either could work. It doesn't seem like a massive difference to me in terms of how that works out. I could be fine with either. So
sure, I just don't know if like legal is going to take a look at this and like completely just change it to the language because it was this way. You know what I mean? Like that's also
absolutely.
where I'm coming from when I'm looking at this.
Well, and I think also to let folks know too, for kind of the long term, the next step for this, if we do approve it, is to get it legal and then see what they say, and that they'll, if they do end up, they may well just say, well, you can't do this for some reason, and that's fine. So it's not necessarily when we vote on it, it won't necessarily be that it's written in stone. There are steps that need to happen subsequent, and so that this is one step among a necessary hurdle, but not the necessary, but not sufficient.
Right.
You were saying something, Lisa?
I was just thinking, in section 1 where it really defines our purpose, it basically spells out that we're there to cultivate relationships, and then we're there to advise the city and parks and the market manager. So I think that advisory role is really clearly spelled out there. So I don't read that engages in strategic planning for the market as saying that this body can then just all of a sudden start coming up with a strategic plan without working with all the other entities that we help serve.
Sure, but I would question, like, why is it spelled out in C, D, and E then? You know what I mean? Because it could just say it could engage in the promotion and the advertising of the market. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of a different thing. It's semantics, of course, but there's a reason that it was written that way already.
Although for me, at least, that would imply that we're actually doing the advertising, whereas here it seems to engage in strategic planning. We actually are engaging in the strategic planning, versus we're not actually engaged in the advertising. We're engaging in strategic planning of the advertising, but not of the advertising. So this might be an exception in that way as to what one active thing that we actually do in terms of that we actually do engage actively in planning.
And it also seems like A through E are part of your job, Stephanie. So that's really clearly spelled out there.
But I guess what I'm getting at is like this body is advisory as its core. Like that's what it is. So it doesn't seem like it would make sense to have it saying like you're engaging without advising me or advising whoever the market manager is. Like that's not, you know what I'm saying? Like it almost seems like it's sort of jumping through that step in the way it's written. But again, that could just be like an interpretation thing.
I guess for my case, I'd feel okay with leaving it and seeing what legal says in that way. I hear what you're saying too, in terms of how just make sure that it is clear about what that means. Inevitably, with all these things, there will be quite a bit of latitude for interpretation. Particularly when we talk about first objectives and duties, that it's only half a page, but it's always going to be a little bit subject to interpretation. But I don't, and again, we'll see if legal ends up giving us a pushback for that, then that definitely seems like an issue. But I think I'm personally quite comfortable. It seems like with how this is, I'm open to adjusting it, but I think I'm comfortable with where it is. So.
And Peter, if I remember right, when I saw the revisions for the parks bylaws, there was a little summary table that went with it to say, here's the changes and here's why we made them. And I think just highlighting, especially in Article 3 here, that these were just lifted right out of the pros plan, so that they know we're not just making this up. It came from another city approved document that's doing long-term planning.
But it was about a different body though. So that's like where I'm getting, you know what I'm saying? Like, yes, it came from the document, but the document was talking about a similar yet different body.
No, this was
Mhm.
specifically on the section that talked about the mission of the farmers market. So it was listed in there.
Right, but not necessarily like PMAX role. You know what I'm saying? So either way, it's fine. We'll just move on and we'll see what legal says when we submit it.
Great. All right. Go
Jeff,
ahead,
do
Peter.
you have any comment for this?
I do not at this point, but you're having a nice learning experience here.
Excellent. And then Jeff, do you have any comment?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Are people ready to vote?
I
I
am.
think so.
So the options are to support, to not support, or to abstain. I guess those are our options. Do you want to run the vote, Lisa?
Sure. Okay. So
So
I
I
think
move
we've
to
all
approve.
Great. And we'll move to approve the vote. And could I get everybody who is in favor to either say aye or raise their hand? Okay. And then anybody who objects, say that they oppose this. And then anybody who abstains.
Not sure how we do this. I'd say it seems like we should have some. Jeff and I. Is Stephanie involved in this as well?
Nope, I don't get a vote.
So it's just Jeff and I.
Yes.
Yep.
So and Peter and I raised our hands for approval.
Okay. It's going to go to legal next, so I'll say approval.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
And Jeff?
approval.
Approval.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm in the middle of, I'm listening and I'm paying attention. I was just, I said I approved. I might have said it at the same time or something.
Okay, great.
That's good.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's 4 approvals. So.
All right.
So then just for next steps, then Stephanie, are you going to bring it up to legal then? Is that how I assume? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we got to go to legal. And then once they have approved it and finalized it, then it goes to city council for a vote.
Sounds good.
And Peter,
Thank you.
could you do that quick summary table and send it to Stephanie to accompany the document, just so they can see what we're doing, and let me know if you need any help with that.
Yeah, I can do that.
Great, thank you. All right. And I just want to say, Peter, thanks initially for bringing this up about a year ago, and this has been a great process. So I think it's been really good. So thank you again for taking your leadership on that.
Welcome.
So, all righty. If nothing else on the bylaws, then we'll there's talking about the producer only subcommittee.
So, Jeb, to give you some background, this was a subcommittee that Stephanie Willett wanted to create and did help create before she was no longer on the commission. And it was to address some questions and comments. I'm sure you've probably heard all about it at market. The questions about, what does it mean that we're a producer only market? Are there certain gray areas that need to be addressed? Are there certain aspects of this that have not been fleshed out well enough, etc.? It's open to interpretation at some level. So that was the sort of conversation we were having. We did have a meeting in person early spring with a bunch of vendors or farmers and producers and artisans at market. And it's sort of been kind of tabled because we've been down to a few folks. And now that you're here, we're looking to revisit that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that as a whole, or just the producer only guidelines in general.
Need to digest it, but I'm sure we'll have some opinion on that. Love to chat with you also around the market and get your.
All right.
And Stephanie, are you guys still working with that document that PMAC and Stephanie Willett actually started working on years ago as a guideline, or have you thrown that out? Or
Yeah, no, I don't think we're really using that. That was like very, very overly defined. And I don't think it was that helpful in terms of like answering everyone's question. It was one of those things that it sort of created more questions, right? That the more specific it became, the more questions would come about because of then there'd be like so many exceptions. So I'm not really sure that that's that helpful for us right now. I mean, it was helpful obviously at the time, but I think we really just need to reconvene as a subcommittee with vendors and see where folks want to take it.
All right. Anything else on the producer only?
Nope.
Okey-doke. So then the next item is the vendor survey questions.
All right. So we have been in the process of working on some questions for a vendor survey to go out about a couple different items. I did put some of them into the agenda, so you would have seen that. So the one question was raised by Carlene Getz before about whether or not annual vendors could get a fourth assigned permanent stall. So that was going to be one question on the survey that we sent to people. Another one that I thought, keeps getting asked. It was asked in the last public comment, last meeting. It was asked to me online last week. It's been asked to me multiple times by other vendors and customers about the use of plastic bags at the market. So I thought it really made a lot of sense to put a question on there. A lot of times when people ask or they request, they want a complete ban on plastic bags at the market, but there's a lot of constraints on what that looks like, whether that's from a food safety standpoint, whether that's specifically the Food Safety Modernization Act, where farmers have to use, or to be able to reuse a container, it has to be able to be sanitized. So that would mean you would have to use a liner in a, paper berry box or a wooden quart box or things like this. And also the issue with a lot of biodegradable stuff, especially for like salad greens or kale, the technology is not good enough yet to make it so those things don't go wilty and go bad very quickly, which would bring more food waste, which is another thing we're trying to combat at the same time. And of course, there's also many vendors who already use sustainable packaging, whether compostable, whether paper bags. I know you, Jeb, you let people bring their candle containers back for a discount to reuse those. So there's a lot of strategies vendors are already doing. So I don't necessarily think like a plastic bag ban, as it were, makes sense necessarily for us. But I really wanted to get more input on, maybe what that could look like. Is there a way that we can incentivize people to reduce the amount of plastic that they're utilizing if they're not already doing so? Because of course the issue is cost, right? It's going to cost farmers, going to cost vendors a lot more to use alternative packaging. And, the customers already have a hard time sometimes with pricing. We don't necessarily want to force everybody to have to increase their pricing, which I think like a ban would do. So that's why I thought, that would be a really great survey question to add, because it's a question we get a lot. And at this point, we don't necessarily have an answer other than like, we already have a lot of people using sustainable options, or we already have a lot of customers bringing their own bags. So that's why I added that as pretty much a direct response to the comments from last meeting.
Thanks for including that. Stephanie, how are you going to ask that question? Because there were so many complicated things in what you were just talking about.
Right. Well, I think it could just be a really simple thing, like, would it be a burden for you to not use plastic bags at the market or something like that, or what level of hardship would it be for you to transition away from plastic bags? Or it could be a couple different questions, how do you feel like you have to use plastic, or, just different ways that we can approach it. I haven't fleshed it out completely yet. But it's more like I know those reasonings. And it's more like I wanted to know, like, what are the barriers to farmers and vendors that are stopping them, right? Is it because of the Food Safety Modernization Act? Is it because of cost? What is going on? Or is it just because people expect a plastic bag and that's what they want to carry certain things around, So
or I guess the other way to ask it is if that would be an important priority for them. Are they willing to support efforts to try to decrease plastic bags at the market, because I almost think that one of the simple things is for people to just say first, do you have your own bags? Instead of just immediately offering plastic as an option to the customers when they come.
Well, I think a lot of people do have that. And that's what I'm saying. Like, for example, not trying to throw them under the bus because they're just following the law, but Wolf Orchard, they have a plastic bag in all of their boxes, right? And that's because she's in full compliance with the Food Safety Modernization Act. And it's not necessarily a case of like an ask or not. It's just that's the way that it is. And obviously that's not everyone, but I do feel like people are already asking in a lot of cases. But it very much depends on the vendor. It very much depends on what they're selling. It very much depends on the volume of sales, right? Because a lot of times, your line is so big that you don't necessarily have more than 30 seconds to get that transaction done because you're waiting for, 20 people are behind you. So I think it just really depends on, what the product is. And I think that's the other issue, like with a one size fits all thing, like that's another reason I don't feel comfortable in having a ban, is it would impact people very differently, right? So for our vendors that already have everything in paper or, don't have produce that needs to be refrigerated, right? Easy. Like if you have tomatoes, put them in a paper bag, easy. But what are you going to do with your salad mix? Are you going to put that in a paper bag? Like, I don't know if you know what I'm saying. So I think it's more like gauging what the barriers are to people than the will, because I think people would love to do it if it made sense financially, if it made sense to keep their product fresh. But there's a lot of other things. So that's, I think, more what I'm interested in asking in terms of like, how do we solve this instead of just like, what are your thoughts on this? I guess, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But yes, I'm not sure exactly how that will look. I just added it to the survey recently as a wanted to make the people realize that we are listening. It's just sometimes things move slowly. And then the last two things were, this question, and this sort of came out of our last meeting too as well, like sort of asking like something about what would be the impact of a winterization, like would you be more likely to come to the market if it were somehow, not as cold or not as windy, or, if there was something like that involved. That's the question I was thinking. And that's why it's tied to attendance and winterization. Because again, we already know what a lot of people think about having a place that's not cold and not as windy, right? It's more of a question of like how that would even happen. Whereas the other one is like, I want to know if that would actually change people's attendance or not. Maybe the answer is yes. Maybe the answer is no, right? Is it going to cause people to have more root crops when they don't have a greenhouse to come to market? Probably not. But for people that are instead, going to Royal Oak or places that are indoors or Flint instead, I want to know that information.
I guess that's true. It's like there are three buckets in terms of people who definitely, for practical reasons, just it doesn't make any sense for them to ever come in the winter. For people who will always come anytime in the winter, and then that middle, and making sure we know how big that middle, the undecided, the swing voter.
Right, exactly. And I think part of it too is like, we know it's probably going to cost a lot to fix the office building problem in all reality. So, it's another thing too, where like, how pressing is it? If it made it so that like 30 more vendors showed up in the winter, that would be a really different thing than if it was just like maybe 5 people would be swayed or something like that. Because again, everyone has a different product, everyone's got a different season, and those things are differ between the people.
One other thing that we talked about with the wording on the winterization project is there any way to ask people to prioritize what they think is important? And I know this is going to open a can of worms, but I keep, my pet peeve is the wind. because it impacts things so many times out of the market. And actually, sometimes I've been there when the gusts have come up and it's been dangerous. So, there's other people that are concerned about heat and things like that. And that's not a very good way to think about how to add that into the question. But I was also thinking about if there can be any input on the factors that are challenges for the vendors in terms of the weather, just to get an articulation of that to help with city parks, if we can get some movement on thinking about a winterization project to see these are some of the priorities.
Yep.
Just one other suggestion.
And not to play devil's advocate, but who knows? Maybe when the two big, tall apartment buildings go in, it might break the wind.
Or maybe it'll make it a wind tunnel.
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking more about the one on the other side. That's going to be a lot longer. The one on Catherine, because that's where the wind always comes from. It was what it seems during the market, because that's the most open, because it goes like right across the courthouse lot, across our lot, into the structure. But if there's a 6-story building right there. But yes, I agree. I think prioritization and like attendance and how these things go together can all be folded into that question.
Yeah. And I'd like you adding in linking the attendance into that. I think that's a great question.
And then the last one was sort of, we had talked about this before, but kind of like general likes and dislikes. And obviously it will be worded differently. But for just the sake of brevity in the agenda, that's what I put it down as. Because again, we don't want to turn it into just like a tell us everything that's wrong. We also want to know what's right. And what are some things we could emphasize moving forward.
Yeah, opportunities and challenges.
Yes. So is there any questions, comments, any feedback, any things you think we should also ask or change once we hand the survey out? We hope that it will be going out in the next couple weeks.
What
I'd be
format
really
are
interested to see the results when they come together. That's interesting.
Yes.
And I know we talked a little bit about what platform are you going to use? Paper?
We're probably just using paper. I mean, like, we're going to get better results with, our vendors that way. And it would be something we're going to hand out during market. Hopefully not on during a very busy time. We'll definitely start with the Wednesday vendors, and then, because, there's much more opportunity on Wednesdays to have a moment to fill something like that out. And then we'll just collect them. And it's just going to be really easy. We're just going to give it to people when we give their token bags, and then they can just give it back to us at the end of the day. So very simple. Not having to figure out another technological device in order to answer our questions.
Great, good. Thanks for moving forward on that.
And that was all I think that I had in that portion of continuing conversations.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is new business, non-agenda items.
Yes. So I don't want to take too much time to talk about this situation, but I really did want to fold it into a question I really had in terms of, the rules, and if there was a way that we could update the rules where staff could feel more comfortable dismissing vendors due to, racist statements. So I'm not sure if folks know, but a couple days ago, Erie Orchards was in the news, unfortunately, because their owner was caught on camera making Islamophobic and racist statements. And unfortunately as well was interviewed by the TV news and seemed to double down on those statements. So I've been waiting to hear back from the higher ups in the city in terms of, what our options are for dismissing them from the market, because of course, I do not feel comfortable there. I don't believe that our Muslim customers or vendors and vendor staff would feel comfortable knowing that they were there. Yesterday they were at market, and I did talk to the staff person. The staff person had no clue, was completely unaware that anything had happened, and was just showing up at work like usual for them. And of course, we don't want them to be the target of any vitriol either, because again, they had nothing to do with the situation. So I was talking with my staff, and we just realized, there's nothing really in the rules that explicitly spells something like this out. It's in the handbook, right, that people shouldn't act like that at market. But there's really nothing in there about, how do we proceed if this happens, off-site, if this involves one of our vendors. Because in this particular case, it's an issue of safety, feeling of safety for our customers, feeling of safety for our vendors, even just coming to market. And then also, we don't want to be associated with that type of behavior, because that's not us either. And we've done, so much work in the last couple of years to, try to be as welcoming as possible. So I just wanted to throw that out there in terms of, maybe this is something that we could talk about in the future. Is there a way that we can maybe come up with a specific policy in the rules that can give market staff support and say something very definitive? Because as of right now, it's very vague. It's kind of like, well, the market manager can do whatever they want based on, I don't even know, I want something really clear and really specific, because again, in this particular case, it's difficult because this is also a vendor that's very high on the seniority list, but it is an owner that's never at market. I've met the person maybe once for a very fleeting, very short amount of time. They never attend. It's always their staff. So it doesn't necessarily seem like it fits in the guidelines we already have, where it specifically states like somebody is engaged in this behavior at market, right? That's not where this happened. Unfortunately, the family that was targeted is actually from Ann Arbor and lives in Ypsilanti. So that's another piece of this. This was very local to us, even though their orchard is more than an hour south. So just not sure if folks had heard about it. I know Jeff had heard about it, but it looks like we lost him. Just not sure if any folks had any input. Obviously, this is something we can put on the agenda, for next time, but just wanted everyone to be aware and see what folks had to say about this very unfortunate situation.
I guess Stephanie had asked if there's any prior situations like this one that you might know of in the past, recent past, and previous history, not with this particular vendor, but in general at our market with a problem like this.
Right. I mean, I've heard hearsay from some people saying, so-and-so said X, Y, or Z. Nothing I personally witnessed. And again, this is a different situation because it was, very prominently caught on film. But that's a good question. And again, like it says in the handbook, if I were to witness something like that, I could dismiss the person because it happened at market. But I'm just not sure, what we can do if it's, say, like a customer complains and said, X vendor, I heard them say an epithet to a customer, or they said there was actually, there was a situation right when I first started where somebody came over to the window and complained and said, oh, a vendor said something that they found offensive. Again, like it wasn't at the level of this, and again, I didn't witness that. But I think it comes back to that question, like we don't necessarily have a policy. So it's like I've been sort of unsure how to proceed. And luckily, this is a very, very seldom thing, right? That's why we don't have a policy. This is not a usual occurrence, at least in our market. But I think that's a great question, is like the way anything I could find was written was in the handbook, which again is sort of like a guideline and not a policy in the same way that the rules are. And then the other one was like, it's stated that it had to have happened at market. Whereas this one obviously,
right,
wasn't. So I don't know. I don't know if that helps answer your question.
I'm also wondering, this sounds like city legal might be able to provide some great guidelines on this. And there must be other places in the city where there's a relationship with vendors, since the farmers market is a little bit unique that way in terms of city parks. So getting some guidelines from legal, especially about the city relationship with vendors, I think would be really, really helpful.
Right. And I'm still waiting to hear back. I reached out to Josh as soon as I saw the news story immediately. And he reached out to Derek and Kevin, and we're just still waiting to hear back from them, because I did hear a news story too that I believe the family that was targeted will be suing the vendor. So that's another aspect of this that obviously us as a market want nothing to do with. So I am waiting to hear back from them. I just wanted folks to be aware. And then from our perspective of, setting policy, I think that would be really helpful for me, helpful for my staff to have something really concrete inserted into the rules moving forward.
In practice too, from at least from what I know from when I've been here, I don't think there's ever been a vendor that's been removed. So none that I know of. That seems quite rare. So that just as a point of fact in terms of that I don't even know what the protocol or process. I know that there have been some discussions of some ethical violations that may have suggested that could happen, but it became a very thorny legal issue because when it comes to seniority and things like that too, that it's contractual. There's a lot of it's complicated. And it's well above the things that I feel comfortable with advising on in that way as to the legal part.
Totally.
And I can discuss, but
right. And I do know there, like when Stephanie was in this role, like there were, I think, 2 that were dismissed from like a producer only thing. I think one was caught reselling something, and the other one, it was a sort of nebulous, similar situation. Again, I was not here, so I can't speak to that. But as far as I know, that's really been the only grounds for dismissal, at least in the recent past. But that's a good question. But I just want to make folks aware and that we are definitely very dismayed at this situation and very much condemn the language that was used and the behavior. It's completely unacceptable. And, like, as I said, a lot of times too, like I wish I had an answer sooner so that I could act sooner, because I don't want it to come across to customers like we're complacent, like we don't care, like we don't know, because none of those things are true. We're just trying to do it correctly and wait for the proper guidance to be able to do what we see fit right now, which would be dismiss this person from the market, which of course, has a lot of consequences. Again, like I feel for his staff that had nothing to do with it, which may be, they may be soon out of a job as a result of this situation that their boss caused. But again, that's why I kind of wanted to throw it out there too, just so folks realize like we are listening, we are trying to come to a resolution that condemns such behavior as unacceptable as it is.
And I guess another way to work with it too would be programming wise, in terms of trying to figure out some other ways for kind of very proactively inclusive programming. And so we have quite a bit of stuff we already do that's kind of community engaging in different ways, and that might suggest and provide some energy toward some other different inclusion projects too. So
that's actually a really great idea. And one of my friends, she works at the County Dispute Resolution Center. So I think I'm actually going to reach out to her as well to see if there's some way we could do sort of like have them table at market or some sort of, or also just obviously support us too. But just see if there's something that they could provide that could be a programming thing. That's a great idea. Okay.
Thanks for bringing it to our attention. And
yes, definitely very unfortunate. And I found out about it because customers were, messaging us on social media about it. And then it was on like the evening news. This was Tuesday night. So, there's nothing that we could have even done for Wednesday market. It was, too late at that point. And plus we had the food truck rally, so I wasn't even coming in the early shift, and it was just a big mess. And, nothing happened at market as far as I know. But, I think also maybe the word hadn't gotten out yet, and I do somewhat worry that Saturday, if they're there, it may be more of an issue for staff and other vendors.
Well, thanks for keeping us posted.
Yes.
I have one brief new business thing too. I had, when Adam was here for the last meeting, I had mentioned about the possibility of grants that might be able to move forward on the infrastructure projects. And I did reach out to Katie Armentrout. She very kindly provided me with a bunch of information. There's a couple other things that I just want to put together, but Stephanie, I wanted to ask you about process. So I can put this document together. I'm happy to share it with PMAC, but I just wanted to share it with you. Should I also send it on to City Parks as chair of the commission, loop everybody in? Just wanted to ask about that process. And then yes,
I would definitely loop Josh into the conversation, certainly.
Okay. So I'll bring in the rest of PMAX since that it came up in this context too, just so you can all see what's out there. And then the other thing that, Stephanie, I don't know if you know anything about is what the process City Parks uses to apply for grants in terms of, okay.
Nope, the only experience I have is applying for our grant through Fair Food Network for the Double Up Food Bucks, and that's pretty much it.
Okay.
But I can tell you it is a very long process with many signatories needed to sign off on projects.
So the process was that you wrote that grant, then it went up to Parks, and then Parks reviews it, and then it goes through other things. Okay.
And yeah, it will also have to go probably in front of the Parks Commission as well.
Okay. Yeah, I know when they applied for some Spark money, I listened to that meeting.
Yeah. And I believe too, once it goes through the Parks Commission, and then it will have to be voted on by City Council too, especially if money is involved.
Always. Well, and that's thinking about the entity of who receives the funding, who oversees it, that sort of thing. But we're not going to start anywhere unless we know where the grants are. So. Okay. Any other new business?
Nope.
Okay, then we have our second public comment.
All right. Would anyone like to provide a comment? If so, please virtually raise your hand. We'll just give it a moment or so, because I know sometimes there's lag on it. All right. Any last comments that the public would like to provide? All right. I am not seeing any.
All right. Then it is 6:51 and we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for all your work.
Great.
All right. Thanks so much. And thanks, Jeb.
Yeah, thanks, Jeb. Welcome.
Glad to have you on board.